Producer and star of the movie, Christian Bale. The director, writer, and producer, Scott Cooper. Wow, nice turnout. Thank you guys for coming out tonight. Nice to see a full theater. Boy, I'll say, nothing like seeing a movie with a crowded space with a bunch of strangers. I love it. So each of you, you've all worked together multiple times, and I think developing relationships are a critical part of being a producer. How did you come to know these guys? What was the origin story for
Well, Christian and I first worked together. This is our third film, and I had a habit after I wrote my debut film, my first film for Jeff Bridges, Crazy Art. I got lucky. Thank you. And I thought, God, I'll just write for my favorite actors. Of course, I didn't know Christian at the time, and I wrote Out of the Furnace for Christian, and thankfully he said yes. And out of that film, for me, grew just a great friendship, kind of a brotherhood. We saw the world the same way. We saw film the same way. We worked very easily together, and for whatever reason, my films, no film is easy to make. For whatever reason, my films have been difficult to make in terms of just location, weather, all the sort of things that kind of infuse the film with a certain feeling, but nonetheless not easy. And Christian is always ready to get into the trenches and never complains. We were shooting in this film and it was -8 below zero. And Christian's number one on the call sheet, and when he doesn't complain, no one does. First one there, last one to leave. So that was our first of 3 films. And then I made a film with Johnny Depp playing the gangster Whitey Bulger called Black Mass that Tyler first produced. And then Tyler produced this. And I think it's important to have a team of people that you're all rowing the same way, in the same direction, and you're all making the same film, and really support one another in ways that make challenging endeavors less so.
What's your side of the story? Start with you, Christian.
To do with producing, or
just working as a producer, or just developing the relationship that led to you producing.
It just came from the producing. Really came from the only things I've produced are things where I've had, and I enjoy working with and for Scott and understanding his vision, and if I've been there for a long time, I perhaps understand it in more depth than most other people, so it becomes a partnership. And then Scott's very generous in sharing with me, changes and asking for my thoughts and casting and everything as well. And I really greatly appreciate that and enjoy that. And so for me, it really comes out of a place of understanding his vision and then trying to serve that and being an aid for him in achieving that.
Yeah. So Tyler, what was, so he said you first began working together in Black Mass.
Yeah.
So that once it's been experience, you keep working together.
Sure, yeah, I think, at the end of the day, it's always fun to work with, friends first and foremost, but, more importantly, people who, kind of make your job easier. And as a producer, I think that's the, the entry level thing. If you can figure out, a way to work with people who make your life easier, it's, it's better results across the board. And, working with Scott, he's just a super calculated director, writer, and producer. And, it's, he definitely helped, made my job much easier.
So you said that your films often have a level of difficulty to them. What was it on this movie, The Pale Blue Eye, that was a problem that you 3 had to work together to solve?
Well, you can't really solve the weather. We were shooting in peak Omicron as well, and that's really tough. Only
So you had no desire to solve the weather. We could have made it
Actually, that is
much warmer climes.
Summer.
No. Let's
Yes.
make it. It's absolutely
yeah.
sub-zero temperatures.
I do think it infuses actors and hopefully their performance. But take Christian 10,000 feet above sea level for our western we made, Hostiles, and that's always fun, I think. And it was really, really cold. But you're always dealing with budgetary issues, scheduling of actors, because the actors that I tend to cast, everybody wants to cast. So you're always trying to work out schedules. Then you have to, of course, amend your shooting schedule, and I like to shoot a particular way. So all those sort of things that Tyler and John Lesher, who isn't here, who's also produces films with me. But Christian's great because he starts from when I fade in and I finish. In terms of casting and producerial, Christian's been making movies since he's 12 years old, and has been on far more movie sets than I have. And if a problem arises, there's a good chance that Christian has seen it in some form. And I would go to Christian and say, well, what do you think about how do we fix this? And he would always come up with great ideas. And Christian also, on a few movies that I make that he's not in, reads my scripts, looks at cuts, all those sort of things. So it's a great collaboration, and Tyler's always there to help solve any financial issues that we have. But I like to go in with a really clear shooting plan and production plan, and always being open for whatever surprises might arise. But generally, when you work with the same people over and over, you feel like you can accomplish anything.
Was there anything unique about The Pale Blue Eye that you had to resolve? And would you say that the bulk of those challenges are before shooting starts or during?
For me, it's always been before, but in this particular process, Scott and I had a shorthand from Black Mass, and Scott and Christian are obviously great friends, and they've worked together on super challenging films. And so I think having a director first and foremost that's willing to go to the trenches and produce from a granular level, I think it really helped us overcome a lot of things across the spectrum, as well as having Christian there from day one, helping solve certain milestones and get us over certain hurdles. It was, once again, kind of working with people who were all rowing in the same direction, I guess, if you will. No one was dead weight.
No, but Omicron was tough. That was really difficult to schedule, because actors would contract COVID and then would have to change our schedule. Fortunately, Christian or our cinematographer, Masanobu Takinagi, never contracted it, at least while we were shooting. Because had you, then of course you have to shut down. So those challenges are difficult. But I will say, when you work with, this is my first film with Netflix, they're such great filmmakers and great partners, and I tell you, they were really, really outstanding and helped us navigate not only Omicron, but all the other issues that you encounter as a producer.
What were some of the early conversations that you had with Scott about the story, about the character? It sounds like you were discussing this as you were writing it, or you were showing him or talking to him about the book by Louis Bayard.
Yeah, well, this is a tricky one. It helps when you have an actor like Christian, because, we've all seen the kind of grizzled detective who has retired, and you think, well, how can you have an actor infuse this or breathe life into a character that we've seen from Columbo all the way into Daniel Craig, right? So, and of course, Christian being Christian Bale, he's able to infuse it with humanity and wit, humor, but intensity, but we aren't doing it for a first viewing, but we're also doing it should you feel like seeing this a second time, because Christian in his performance laid all the breadcrumbs from the opening frame where he's washing the truncheon from the blood from his truncheon in the river, all the way to the end. Clues that would lead you to believe, wow, this guy feels like he's either complicit in something or feels guilty, and Christian was unfortunately tasked with double portrayal.
Was that a lot of the early discussion with Scott about how to portray that duality? You only get to play it once or get to capture it once in the film, but then have it viewed from two different perspectives after you know the ending?
Yeah. Well, I mean, first off, Scott's immensely patient with me, and I'm very grateful for that because he's a cheater and I'm a sloth. Like he writes incredibly intensely and quickly, and I read incredibly slowly. And so thank you, mate. For and also, I have a tendency to try. I do try to find any reason not to work that I can. But we had an immense amount of fun with this one because we did it on every film that we've made together. But in considering the pleasures, the discoveries of a second viewing, which after having seen it, obviously you'll realize is even more pertinent, with this film. And that's a great deal of fun to try to plant those little seeds if we, are fortunate enough that people would actually watch a film for a second time.
Even down to his handwriting, all of the letters are the same, which of course Poe at the end of the film sees that the same hand has written these particular notes, the one that was found in the corpse of Leroy Fry, all of those sort of things all the way through. Christian is very, very methodical about that.
As a filmmaker, as a storyteller, are there things that you're planting, that you're showing, that you hope the audience will forget? I mean, I wondered what he was doing by the creekside when I first saw him, but then I got swept along by the story, and then by the end.
Well, almost every take and every scene, Christian and I would discuss, do we feel like we've crossed that line, that it's too obvious? And Christian would just pull back. And a few takes would be probably more oblique and maybe, not that it would feel like cheating, but we wanted to take it right to that line. And the great thing about Christian is he's, or the great actors, if I imagine you're a jockey and you're in the Kentucky Derby and you just a little bit of a leg here, a little bit of a push here, and after, these guys are the best.
One moment that I kept revisiting was the when he's first approached and asked to take the trip. So people would like to talk to him, and his reaction is, I think, one I want to study again. Can you tell me about playing that moment?
If I decide not to go.
Yes, exactly. There's a lot going through his mind in that moment, isn't there?
Absolutely, yeah, of course, and then absolutely stunned to discover why he's really there when he thought this was the end. This was his final carriage ride. And then his journey after that of the ethics of revenge, which is something which Scott is quite obsessed with. And I'm fascinated with how obsessed he is with that.
It's funny, all three films of ours have some level of revenge.
Yeah,
And his good side.
But then, I love this as, the origin story of Poe and how Poe affects, this fictional character of Landor. Likewise, in that he rejuvenates him and he reminds him of what he does love about life, because I don't think for a second that Landor was imagining anything beyond achieving his revenge. But then, he does go to these lengths of what he does to Ballinger. And then trying to pin it. As we see, Harry saying his Poe so beautifully in the last scene. And I loved that play that Scott created where, and Louis Bayard, who wrote the wonderful book, where the humanity that Poe gives back to Landor that makes him want to live again ends up also actually being a source of shame for him. And he's a man who feels that he's been in absolute control throughout his entire life, self-determination, but discovers himself to be actually at the mercy of others. And that's a shockingly new revelation to him at his age, when he thought all of his stories were behind him. And we discovered actually, no, the stories that will come to define him are in front, and the characters that will define him are still in front of him. So it's a beautiful. I just love Scott manages that so wonderfully. The nuances of creating, an exciting whodunit, but at the same time a beautiful character portrayal that just this origin story of the godfather of the macabre, the godfather of the detective story.
I'd say it's also very haunting. It's I saw it in October. I thought it was a great October watch because you have that spooky season and Halloween coming up and Edgar Allan Poe and the air is getting colder. Can you talk to me about creating that atmosphere? A big part of it is the locations and the actors that you cast who all are able to embody personalities that seem like they're from long ago.
Yeah, well, one of the things that when and I use a lot of the same crew, cinematographer, Masanobu Takinagi, and Stefano Cella, who's my designer, and Kasia Willikin-Mamone, who creates my costumes. What I want to do, or with any film should do, is really transport the audience in a way that you don't see the artifice. So often I see period pictures, and it feels like, really well-made movies and acted movies, but it sometimes feels like you can really sense the make-believe, just actors in costumes. And I wanted, always with my films, to feel like all of the period details, all of the production design, the camera work, costumes, all recede to the background. So it's all about characterization. And in terms of casting, because I make generally very American films, and I love international cinema, and British cinema in particular, and just a group of actors that I would see over the course of my life and think, God, I would love to work with the great Timothy Spall, or Toby Jones, or Gillian Anderson, or Simon McBurney, or Charlotte Gainsbourg. And as I was writing this, I thought, God, now's the time I can do this. And I also love really great, interesting faces that tell a story, or faces of people that you say, wow, that person's seen something. And it feels like in a film that's in 1830, that the faces that I was able, fortunately, to cast all told a story in a kind of a unique way. So when you have everybody kind of rowing in the same direction, and you all understand that we aren't going to see the work. I mean, Christian gives a great nuanced portrayal, so does Harry Melling, and then the rest of the cast, and then everybody feels like they can feel confident enough to do the work, but not have the work scream, look at me.
But the costumes, the production design, it has to be on point or it does call attention to itself.
Oh, yeah.
In order for it to recede, it has to.
It's extraordinarily
That's the
authentic.
same key.
I mean, if you want to talk.
Well, West Point, the military academy helped us a great deal. All of our costumes were handmade, even all the cadet uniforms, and we spent a lot of time at West Point, and they were technical advisors and allowed us to look at uniforms from 1830, which haven't changed a great deal, and use the same fabric, the same buttons, and then of course, most of the characters have very tight-fitting wardrobes, but Christian wanted not to be bound by any rules or regulations or anything that constricted him both physically and also emotionally and psychologically, which is why he would blanch against the rigidity of West Point. So all of that hopefully, in some way or another, transports you to southern New York in 1830.
Can you talk to us about Masanobu's cinematography? There are also some scenes where I'm wondering how you lit this. Are you using natural candlelight for some of those scenes? Or is it a simulation?
No, there's certainly candles, real candles, but he would also augment that because I wanted the blacks to feel really deep, and I wanted there to feel like a lot of texture in the frame. Masa's a real master, a master of composition, a master of lighting. It's our fourth film together. We looked at a lot of work from Rembrandt and a lot of the Dutch masters. If you look at their portraiture, it's a lot of deep blacks and very, very rich colors. But as I was approaching the film, I said, I want this to feel like it's a film that was shot in color, but almost black and white. So there's a lot of black in it. And shooting, Christian and I discussed shooting it in the summer just for scheduling, but I just couldn't do it. It's going to be a tough film, but it feels like this is the right thing to capture the kind of
That would have been way too pleasurable.
But the snow and the rocks and the bare trees create that monochromatic look.
Yeah, and getting the camera and the crew and the equipment to locations that are very difficult. It takes a real effort. You have to have a crew that just, are very passionate filmmakers, and thankfully I have that, and people that, again, when they know that Christian's on the call sheet, it feels just like having now made 3 films with him, that everybody does their best, and they show up to knowing that Christian is going to bring his A grade, and it really kind of sets the tone. And we got some complaints that it was too cold, but we did.
Not from Christian.
No,
Just
no.
now.
My wife actually did say, Scott, you and Christian and Masa have to be careful not to shoot when it's too cold. And I said, honey, when you're shooting, and Netflix is paying hundreds of thousands of dollars a day, you can't just call Scott Stuber or Ted Sarandos and say, it's just too cold in Pennsylvania to shoot. It just doesn't work that way.
How did you choose the locations? And Tyler, maybe you could weigh in here too. I assume it's difficult to find places that are untouched by the modern era, and finding locations that give you the variety you need, but also seem like they could be from 1830. How did you settle on Pennsylvania?
We were going to do Philadelphia at first, and Scott had and Christian as well, had a ton of experience in Pittsburgh.
Where we shut out of the furnace.
Yeah, and it just made more sense in Pittsburgh. We got more landscape, we got more depth and scope.
Yeah, in shooting up in the Allegheny Mountains and up by Erie, Pennsylvania. But we did shoot some of the exteriors up in New York towards the end of the cliff stuff and the Hudson River. But shooting close to Lake Erie in January and February it's brutal. For sure. But also shooting in places that, because so often you have to go, as everybody in this room knows, you have to shoot where states offer really competitive incentives. Louisiana, Georgia, Massachusetts, New York State, Pennsylvania. I wish California had a better tax incentive, easier to get more money. My God, I don't understand this.
You have some supporters in the audience.
Yeah, it's really remarkable. I mean, otherwise, I would be shooting here. I would love nothing more than to stay home and shoot in California. So I moved here. But they make it easy to shoot other places.
We started by talking about your partnership, your friendship, the importance of having relationships as a producer. There's a cameo in this film, and a person thanked in the credits,
Yes.
who's now a new U.S. Senator, John Fetterman. Tell me about
Yes.
your relationship with him, what his part is in the movie. I don't know if did anybody in the audience spot him?
Yeah, well, it starts with, Christian and I have become good friends with now Senator John Fetterman. When I wrote Out of the Furnace, I had been researching still towns, dying still towns, and he was the mayor of Braddock, Pennsylvania, which was known to be one of the, as you know it well from Pittsburgh.
I'm from Pittsburgh, yeah.
Yeah, it's one of the toughest, towns that's fallen hard times in the entire Rust Belt, but incredibly photogenic. And it was difficult to secure locations, and I'd written it when I was touring with Crazy Heart. I'd been reading about Braddock, and I was writing Out of the Furnace, and I took a day and drove around, and I'm not sure that it was going to be so film friendly. So I reached out to the mayor, who at that point was kind of a prominent figure for someone who had tried to revitalize Braddock. And he was very instrumental in helping Christian and me shoot almost the entire film in Braddock, Pennsylvania. And really, he loved the movie and was an ardent supporter of the film, wrote a few articles about the movie and his experience. And Christian and I just became pals with him. And then he became the lieutenant governor, and then of course he ran against Dr. Oz. Who would think that the TV personality could, be a big politician?
Did anybody bring up your celebrity?
Sorry. Sorry, Netflix.
I paid a little tribute to John with in Out of the Furnace. I had the zip code of Braddock. The locals say Braddock.
Yes.
The zip code tattooed, across my throat for that. And then John's got this fantastic face.
He does look like he's
Welcome,
having a
Theo.
time.
And so I said to Scott, we got to have him in the tavern, right? You got to have that face. That's a face that fits in the 1830s. Because a lot of faces don't fit in the 1830s. We looked at some really wonderful actors.
who just
the
felt
faces, you just went, their face just doesn't fit. And Scott cast beautifully. I mean, I was so grateful for the people that he cast who I got to.
He looks like a
perform with.
survivor, doesn't he?
Oh man, he's surviving anything.
way he embodies
Yeah.
Pennsylvania. He also looks like, because even if it's, I don't know, he showed up on set, it was, 15, 18 degrees, and he always wears shorts. and then, of course, as he won,
A hoodie.
someone said, John
Carhartt
Fenton is the
hoodie.
first grip who's now a state senator.
Oh yeah, I saw that. Yeah. First key grip elected to the state senate. It sounds like even though it was a heavy story, that there was a lot of joy on set. And Christian, you've talked about there's almost too much joking that you would have to step away from sometimes.
With that, you do have to when you're dealing with heavy subjects like this. You know, you have to. Otherwise, you just get too exhausted, and you can't do the scenes. Particularly for me, it was with Tim Spall, Simon McBurney, and Toby Jones, because they know each other very well and go back years, and they're like the Three Stooges, and they are wonderful, what I call proper actors, who can joke right up to the point where they hear Scott call action and then bang, they're in it.
It's remarkable.
And I'm not a proper actor. I can't. So they would be in it and I would be giggling. And so I kept on having to just say, guys, I can't, and walk away because they're masters.
It's a fit for
What
Landor,
they do.
giggling.
You know?
Well, and Robert Duvall, Christian and Robert Duvall.
Let's hear it for Robert.
92. Christian and Bobby did, Mr. Duvall did Newsies together. It's a bit of a reunion. Yeah. They were always joking.
You want to tell us about getting him in the movie? I know it's a story you've told many times, but
Yeah, well, he produced Crazy Heart, and he's been a mentor of mine, and almost like a second father. I speak to him still probably 3 or 4 times a week. Reads all my scripts, and he adores Christian. And anytime Christian and I are making a film, he wants to read the script and see if anything makes sense. And he said, I'd love to read that script, and I sent it to him, and because he hasn't acted in a while, and he said, I love this, and I want to play Jean Pepe, which I said, feels like, let's make him feel like what Tolstoy looked like. And having him on set was just a real treat because he and I are so close. He and Christian go way back, and when Duvall's in town, we have dinner together, the three of us. It's really, really nice.
And he really enjoyed working with Harry as well.
He loved Harry Melling, who played Poe.
Yeah. And Harry was fantastic. The minute that Scott and I saw he put himself on tape, I couldn't imagine anybody else. So when I was reading the script, reading the book after that, it always just became Harry's face that I saw. And he's also in that place that's it's very enviable when he's ridiculously experienced. But for a lot of people, this may well have been the first time you might have seen him, in a feature film. So he is the character. That's it. And that's the perfect place to be in as an actor.
well, thank you for joining us. Thank you for sticking around.
Yeah, thank you guys so much.